Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by Kate. Kate is the only. What did you say? The last man standing, the last person standing at the house with.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Struck by COVID.
Yeah.
Struck by COVID. She's warned that if the phone rings, she's going to have to take it because she's got some ill family members at the moment, so we might have to stop the recording. So, but thank you for making time in amongst this illness to come on the show, and I really appreciate you doing that.
Most welcome.
Yeah. So, could you introduce yourself to the listeners, please, Kate?
Yes, of course. So my name's Kate, Kate Patel. I'm a social worker. I've been qualified social worker since the year 2000, and actually since qualifying, there's always been a thread in my career with adoption in it. I actually did a placement in my training with an adoption team, and that kind of ignited my interest and passion, I suppose. And then I've done various things over the years, but for the last 10 years I have worked exclusively with family placement services. I'm currently placed I currently work at Diagrama. I am their post-adoption support manager and panel advisor. So that's a little kind of short introduction about me, I suppose.
Yeah, I love the word the word that you used there. You said igniting your passion, and I love that. I think that what's better than a passion that's passion that's lit, and the fact that we have so many people coming on this show whose passions have been lit by adoption from different contexts, from different experiences. Now, before we started recording, you were saying that you felt sometimes because that you are coming from adoption from a professional perspective rather than a lived experience, you sometimes feel that feel somewhat inadequate on this. And I wanted to share with the listeners my take on that, which is that Thriving Adoptees podcast is all about different perspectives. And it's, as one of my mentors told me like 7-8 years ago, it's hard to see the picture when we're in the frame. So what I mean by that is hard to see our strengths, it's hard to see our weaknesses. Arguably, especially for British people, we're better at seeing our weaknesses, and the kind of modesty that's built into our cultural heritage. We see our weaknesses far easier than we see our strengths. But what the perspective of a professional like yourself, Kate, brings is perspective. So in your 21 years since you've qualified in 2000, you've seen a lot of families go through this.
Yeah.
And you continue to see that. And what you have seen, the perspective that the perspective that you got allows you to see the wood for the trees, which we can't see. As in none of us can see the wood for the trees when we're too close. We're too close to it. So and I was talking about how I've been losing a lot of perspective recently with builders. It's got nothing to do with adoption, but I've been losing my perspective completely on the building projects that we've had done. And interestingly, when it came down to it, I had an insight a couple of weeks ago. I don't feel safe.
Okay.
I don't feel safe with this guy for a number of reasons. And I thought, I don't feel safe. I don't trust him. And it's like, wow, that explains why I've had such visceral reaction, because I lost perspective in the heat of the moment. And in the heat of the moment, adoption can be it can be it's a hot topic. I guess it can be pretty heated. There's emotions are running high in the household, like temperatures are running high in your household at the moment with COVID.
Yeah.
And when we're lost in the when we're lost in that experience, we lose perspective. And I think, like we've all got blind spots. We've got blind spots in our in our life, and when we see what we've previously been blind to, that helps us thrive. So with all being, does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I think it's a very kind sort of way of sort of actually honouring the role and of the professional role of the social worker within the doctor's family life, which I think is right and good to do, to be honest.
Yeah. So when it comes, I've used this word blind spots, and it was an idea that came up in terms of before we pressed the record button and thought about what we're going to talk about. I thought it might be a fertile area to explore. So in your 21 years experience, what are some of the blind spots that you've seen?
Oh gosh, very good. Good question. I suppose I think one of the things which often strikes me is thinking about the adults now when they put themselves forward and say, right, I think we want to pursue adoption. This is the road that we want to take. And one of the things which often gets thrown back at the sort of professionals is, gosh, why is this assessment process so intense? Why is it so intrusive? Why do social workers need to know about our childhoods and about previous relationships and about difficulties or traumas, etc., that we've experienced? What's that about? Why is it so long? And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes the realization of that comes quite a few months later when they then find themselves in the midst of parenting children and children who have had a difficult start to life, because in modern day Britain, that's what we're talking about. Adoption it comes about because of that, and it's then that kind of realization of, goodness, actually parenting this child can press my buttons, can hit spots, and actually if I've not resolved those past difficulties or issues or whatever, then actually how can I remain the calm, kind, caring parent that I need to be, and help to reparent a child who's experienced difficulties if I'm struggling with my own difficulties that I've never really thought about or reflected on, or perhaps I have, but not to the extent that I need to. So I think maybe that sums up for me about blind spots, I suppose, is that kind of initial sort of reaction of, really, do you really need to know all of this? And it doesn't seem to make sense, but actually quite often it does make sense longer down, and there is a reason for our intrusive-ness, I suppose. Yeah. Does that make sense to you, Simon?
It does, and what pops into my head is a previous episode. People can check this out, listeners can check this out on the back catalogue with a chap called Jamie Beaglehole, and he talks about this. He talks about this from his own experience, like them realizing why the process took what it took.
Yeah.
And the key word is realizing, so realizing, people use the word realizing, say, see the world with real eyes, have the insight.
Yes.
See it for themselves. And the reason I kind of labour that point is because we live in a world that's obsessed with strategies, and actually what changes our world is when we see things differently. It's insights that change the world, not strategies. But insights are a kind of I often talk about this. It's like you got to wait out. It's not like a plan. You have to hang out at the bus stop for insights. Like, people are hanging out right now. The people that are listening to this podcast or listen to this podcast when it's published are hanging out at a bus stop for insights. So you're already doing what I'm advocating to do. And I'm just making the insight process a little bit clearer, because once we understand that insights, like they're an inside job, we can't have them. I can't make them happen for the listeners any more than you can make them happen. But by kind of exploring how they happen, then they're more likely to happen. We're making the situation more favorable for these insights to occur. And they may take a long time for the bus to arrive. People hanging out at the bus stop, but it always takes the bus 15 seconds to travel that last 100 yards, when it's come around the corner. So they're kind of like, they're reliable, but they're more likely to happen. They're more likely to happen when things are on the back burner. So in the heat of the moment, we're looking to resolve issues. But often when we sleep on it, then the answer becomes clear the following morning. And insights, often people say, I've heard people talk about this before, the best, some interview research they did, where do your insights happen? Well, your insights happen when you're not thinking about the problem at hand, when you're in the shower. That's a favorite place for insights, because your mind's elsewhere. It's freer. When you're driving, and you've not got particularly on mind. Somebody heard this. I heard somebody talking about somebody hearing this, and they said, so how many more showers should my staff have? It's not a cause-effect relationship. Insights, how we see through stuff. So an insight is the opposite of a blind spot, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting saying that as well, because obviously I was talking then about the beginning of the process, and obviously my role at Diagrama now is within post-adoption support, so that's the other end of the process. And one of the things that we're striving to do is to be able to give opportunities for adopters to have more opportunities to maybe uncover their blind spots, if you like. We have some support groups which are sessions, that where it's facilitated by social workers who have got a really good knowledge of adoption, but it's primarily for adopters to be able to talk honestly, openly about the highs and the lows. We're running a enhanced connection group. Again, that's very much about kind of opening up and talking about the realities, the highs and lows and what they feel, but actually not talking about kind of it from a how am I going to fix my child perspective, but talking about it in terms of what is my response, how can my response change, what do I need to do to be able to see things a little differently, to have some insights, etc. And I think sometimes I'm aware that it can sound quite woolly. As social workers have probably got a reputation of being a bit, sort of woolly, and, just give us practical tools, just give us strategies, all this talking and listening, is that really going to help? But I have seen time and time again how it can really help. And I am a really big believer in the fact that the people, have got those resources within themselves, and giving them a space to be able to actively listen to them and to sort of direct them in certain areas. You see people do incredible things, in children be able to really do incredible things as a result, but certainly adults. So I don't know if that helps and links in with the conversation we're having, really, Simon.
It totally does. And the key word for me that you said is space. Right? So space for insights. And again, back to the kind of cultural obsession with strategies, you know, racking our brains. Like, so we want to know how to do something. So we, you know, in the old days, we just racked our brains, didn't we? But now we Google it, and we come up with all these. We've got all these suggestions, right? And we think, so that disempowers us, because we think, oh right, well, somebody's got the, you know, here are the answers, and then they don't work, and then they think, well, what was wrong about it? And the thing, so we get the Times newspaper on a Saturday and a Sunday, and one of the sections often has the life advice section, and it's all really plausible. It's all really, really plausible stuff, but there's far too much of it. And pretty much everything, you know, and there's a caveat at the end that says that everybody's different, you know. But the newspapers have got a job to do, and that's to fill the page with all these strategies. And we're kind of like, we're really impatient. Everybody's really impatient to get stuff sorted. You know, just give me the what to do's. And if there's too many options, it's not tailored to our child. It doesn't come from wisdom. It doesn't come from space. We're overloaded with all the options. We haven't got to do that. Right. We're overloaded with options, rather than looking for wisdom. And the wisdom comes in the space. You've got that, you know, in a support group, you've got time and space, and you've got connection, and you've got shared experience, and you've got a melting pot that creates the space for people to have the insights. I know what to do. So I had a really big insight this morning for myself, and it came from nowhere. These things come out of the blue. Right? So for about 30 years, I've wished that I could sleep better. Okay. Right. And so I go to sleep, fine, no problem. But I wake up early in the morning, and I start thinking about how I'm going to change the world. You know, how am I going to get people more on my podcast, and And, you know, what am I going to do now? How am I going to use? What new stuff am I going to bring to the community? What new resources can I provide for adoptees and adoptees? And, you know, and like, when I'm going to make some money out of it, because my wife keeps on saying that I need to make some money out of it, right? So I've been doing this for 30 years. I've not been doing the adoptions, but I've been waking up early and thinking that's a problem for 30 years. And the idea that came to me this morning was, aren't I lucky to be so passionate about what I do that I'm thinking about it all the time? Yeah. And that's like, it's a total game changer. That's 30 years worth of stuff. I've been pretty passionate. I've done different stuff before I came into this adoption space, but I've always been passionate about
Yeah.
what I've done. I've not done stuff that I don't care about.
Lucky. Very lucky.
I've been really fortunate to do that. I did spend 3 months working in a coffee factory in Berlin in 1986, and I hated it. Like I was sweeping the floor and watching machines, and I have I don't know how people can do that stuff, because I couldn't do it. I was supposed to be there for 4 months. I came back a month early. I just couldn't hack it. So I've always been really passionate about stuff. So that's a game changer. So something that's been set in my mind, like awake is bad,
yeah,
becomes awake is good. Lucky to be awake. Lucky to be doing something that I'm so passionate about that it drives my creative forces. So those are the insights, but that came completely out of the blue. And what's it got to do with adoption? It hasn't got anything to do with adoption at all. What it's got to do with is insights. And I'm just providing a different example because it's something that's really fresh to me. And it's like, so where are you looking for? And this is a question for the listeners. Maybe a question for you as well. Okay. So where are you looking for insights? Where are you looking to, what changes in your world would change your world? What would be really great? Where would you like to have some new insights? Would you like to have some new insights in terms of your parent, in terms of yourself? Because one of the insights I've had about this through the podcast is a lady called it's completely gone. Holly-Ann Petrie.
Yeah.
A past episode. Check it out. Right. It's called how to unpack our own baggage as adoptive parents.
Brilliant.
And it's about us as parents. I'm lumping me into this as well. It's always about us.
Yeah.
So we've got this world that's obsessed with the parenting stuff, the parenting techniques, the parenting strategies, the understanding of trauma. It's kind of like that. It's all about them. Yeah. Well, that's not how change happens. Change comes from within inside us. It's an inside job. All feelings are an inside job. That for me was a game changer. I thought the weather was making me cheesed off. You know what I mean, this is the flippant thing that I use to explain the kind of, we live in this world that we think it starts with us. Yeah. So I can't change my wife. I can change me.
Yes.
We can't change our kids. We can change us.
Yeah.
And here's another good news. I've said it once, I'm going to say it again. Listeners, by doing the listening to the Thriving Adoptees podcast, you are already doing this. You don't need to do anything new. Because you're already hanging around at the, as I say, hanging out at the bus stop, waiting for insights. So, because I know where I would go when I hear something like I said a couple of minutes ago. I'd say, so how do I do that, Simon? You're already doing it, listeners. And as soon as I say that, I think, oh, Simon's being a bit patronizing there. But I know it's just how my response to be. Yeah, but how do I do that? Because we're all looking for the how, right?
And that's interesting as well. Sorry to interrupt you. What you just said about being patronizing, and I think sometimes that's again something which practitioners who I work with are very conscious of all the time, because it's so easy for us to kind of sort of say things, and I can see sometimes, I know the struggles that some families go through on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, and day in, day out, and do deal with some incredibly challenging and difficult things, and actually sometimes what we can say must sound, well, you just need space and time to sit and talk about it and reflect, etc. And so that must feel very it could feel very patronizing, I could imagine, and that is so I would hate to come across like that. I think it is really important to acknowledge, you know, what hard work and people are doing on a day-to-day basis up and down the country, you know, with the kind of with the experiences they're having to manage with children who have had real challenges and continue to have real challenges. And yeah, I think that's also a very important message to put out there. You know, what I find very difficult sometimes is the kind of, there is still, I think, a fairy tale image about adoption. It's the happy ever after. So, like, I've had that in my career over the years. Or, oh, that, oh, you're a social worker. Gosh, that's hard work, or whatever. And then us, sort of say the area that I work in. Oh, how lovely! It must be so nice to work in adoption. Well, absolutely, yes, it is. However, that doesn't mean that all I see is an easy life as soon as an adoption order is granted for families. No, it isn't. And, they continue to have to work super hard and really fight for things that other parents will never have to fight for. And so the other kind of blind spot, I suppose, for me is sometimes is the fact of the need for adopters to look after themselves. That actually a really good friend of mine always talks about putting your own oxygen mask on first before that of a child, or for that of anyone that you're with in a plane. That is the first rule, and it's a very glib comment again, isn't it? But if you're not well and healthy in your own emotional state and your own physical state, then how can you deal with someone who's experienced trauma, someone who is highly stressed or highly anxious or highly controlling? How can you do any of those things if you're not kind of feeling absolutely tip-top yourself? So self-care is really, really important. And again, something we band around, but is really important. So I hope that's okay to say.
Of course. The thing is, so I had a question for you. Do you so you were really vulnerable with me, and you said, like, sometimes I feel inadequate, and that that led us to what I think is a great topic. We're exploring a great topic, but a lot of people wouldn't be vulnerable enough to say that. And I felt, as I was saying what you said to me, I thought, I didn't check with Kate whether I should have said, this using the word adequate. But it paves the way for an honest conversation, and we honest conversations help us get to the heart of the matter and stop messing around at the edges and propagating these and continuing these happily ever after unicorn stories. Or the other one is the doom and gloom story. I think we're kind of like, everything's a bit black and white. We're all looking for black and white, aren't we? When it hits shades of grey.
Yeah.
And that's a blind spot for me, I think. Looking for the black and white, looking for the one way. We're always looking for the one way, aren't we? The how is the one way. We're looking at assuming that there is only one way, and we just haven't found it yet. What are the are you do you kind of share that vulnerability with the adopters, that you of what you've told me about the fact that your lack of experience makes you sometimes feel inadequate?
No, I don't think I would ever say it like that. I think it's important. I do think it's important to sort of, like, back in the day when I used to practice with sort of in safeguarding sort of situations, quite often would get the comment would quite often get thrown to me, or kind of like, well, do you have your own children? You're telling us what to do. Do you have your own children? And actually at the time I didn't. But I was I'm like, I'm not here to talk about my children, here to talk about your children. And that generally used to get people's backs up even more. But, there's an element that you have to remain sort of, you've got a professional role and you have to kind of keep your boundaries or whatever and stuff like that. I think, over the years, I've learned from the fact of, people really appreciate it when you are as honest as you can be with them. So, I will say to families, look, I'm not an adopter and I haven't been adopted myself, so I don't come to you with those experiences. However, I can share with you what I've seen from others, and I can share with you about that knowledge that I've learned along the way. And I'm not expecting everything to work for you, but I think it kind of giving people the opportunity to be heard, to have empathy, and to hear people is incredibly powerful, I think. And I've generally experienced when I've been able to do that, it helps to unlock things for people.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work in primary schools, what the Americans would call elementary schools, about for mixed kind of bags, different sort of topics. So some people would call what I did like an inspirational speaker. Some people, because it's my starting point was, what's your dream, kids? And what do you want to make? What do you need to do to make your dream come true? How do you need to be to make your dream come true?
Yeah.
And then backing into thoughts, feelings, and identity from that perspective, right? Just as and what I found, and I would also, I would take it from there. We would play games. So it'd be like it's a workshop. So I'm asking them questions. I'm not telling them anything. I'm drawing the information out of them. I'd move it on from there to, how can you ignore kids? Ignore other people that say you can't make your dream come true. And from that, it was a very short hop to empowering kids to ignore bullies, to rise above bullies. I'm talking about emotional bullying here, not physical bullying. And I would share my experience with them when I was their age or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And that, I stumbled upon that. I didn't go into it with that strategy. I went with the flow of the conversation, found it really worked, and then went that way or a slightly different way with all the other 1,600 kids I worked with, as it went on. So I found that vulnerability as, when I was your age, I went through this bullying. This is how it made me feel. This is how you don't need to feel. This is why you don't need to feel like that anymore. And this is how you kind of do it, right? And that created well, for one, it was incredibly powerful, because 10 kids would tell me, a third of the class would tell me at the end of that session, we'd only talked about bullying for 5 minutes, that they were immune to bullying, that they'd gone from the sensitive camp that I was in when I was a kid into the thick-skinned laugh it off camp. They'd had an insight, they'd had a realization about that it was the bully's problem, not theirs, and that what the bully said couldn't actually harm them emotionally. And that vulnerability was incredibly powerful. So my question to you is, as a mum, as a mum, how do you see vulnerability? Because you're not an adoptive mum, but you're a mum. And I was talking to a lady yesterday for the podcast, and she said she's she has a same-sex partner. So she was saying that the issues that I face are 90% parenting, 5% adoption, and 5% LGBT.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a mum, what role does vulnerability have in your connection with your kids?
Oh, it has a huge role. You know, for me, it's sort of like, you know, I'm the type of, if my child is crying and upset, then I've generally got tears in my eyes as well. I don't hold that back. There's times when they need to see that I can kind of like cry with them and then pick myself up and go, right, let's think about how we're going to manage and do this. There's times when I just think, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. I feel absolutely overwhelmed with your grief and upset. Let's think of a way to kind of, you know, cuddle up and, you know, watch some YouTube together, or, you know, sort of have a hot chocolate and, you know, play a game together or whatever, etc. and stuff. And once they're then settled, get on the phone to a really good friend and go, oh my gosh, they've just told me this and this has happened. My heart's breaking over it. I don't know. I can't see how I'm going to ever help and support with that. And that's when the good friend kicks in with their, right, I can be a bit of a rock for you, which then means that you can then become a rock for your child or whatever and stuff. Or it's, you know, it's having time with my husband and, you know, he hasn't seen or heard what's gone on today and can come at it from a different perspective, and then that's the support you need. Other times it is like, I need a bit more support than my good old support network or whatever, etc. Actually, I think I need a bit of insight from a professional, and I'm not afraid as a social worker myself, I'm not afraid to kind of join a support group, or, you know, to talk to my children's school and go, we're struggling with this at the moment, what do you think, or whatever, etc. So that, I suppose, for me is vulnerability, but equally it's the joys as well. Do you know what I mean? I want them to be able to see, you know, that, you know, I am an emotional person. If something you know, if there's a sports match or whatever on in the house, I'm not the one to sit there tamely and go, oh, well done, you've just scored a goal, or well done, oh yeah, they've done, that's good, that's a nice feeling. I'm there going, yeah, right, you know, whatever, etc. And then I'll be really gutted if someone doesn't win or doesn't lose, you know, because I think children, well, that's the only way I know how to parent, if I'm honest, is actually to be able to show them, you know, that I have highs and lows as well, and this is how, you know, sometimes those highs and lows, you know, are not regulated well, and other times I do, and that's a modelling kind of experience, isn't it, for my children? So that's how I would do it from a parent's perspective. And absolutely, you're right in terms of, you know, parenting any child, you know, whether it's your biological child or whoever, you know, it's that there are lots and lots of you know, things which are common. There are far more things that we have in common than isn't, you know, and parenting adopted children, you know, there's a lot of huge similarities.
Yeah. Do you that's incredibly powerful. I'm a big fan of that, you know, modeling thing, and I often, when I talk about this, I often use the Gandhi thing, the Gandhi quote, "Be the change that you want to see in the world." I think sometimes that kind of floors people a bit because it's Gandhi, you know. Well, it's just Simon Ben repeating Gandhi. What about the extent to like, so I found this sharing of my bullying story very powerful as a way to connect with the kids. So to what extent do you share stories from of stuff that's going on at work, perhaps, or stuff that went on for you as a child with your own children?
It's measured, and the reason it's measured is because there can be a fine line between overwhelming your children as well, and I want my children to like all parents do. Let's face it, you just want them to have, you just want them to have the best life that they can do. And, you know, I'm a particularly empathetic person. So once I've heard something difficult or sad, it comes into me, and it's very difficult for me to then kind of forget about it, if you like. So I'm conscious that if my children are like that as well, then, you know, they might not, you know, then that could be quite overwhelming for them. And let's face it, I mean, you know, over the years, especially in my working life, I have come across some incredibly sad and difficult situations that I've worked with birth parents, you know, who just are in desperate circumstances, difficult lives that they've had, and, you know, and having to remove children from them because that's the right thing for the children is something that you don't take pleasure from or relish at all. And you know, there's issues of confidentiality which I wouldn't want to share with my children, but also it's just that actually I can do that because I am supported, you know, with supervisors or whatever around me, etc. And I can process it because I'm an adult and you know, with a professional context around me. Having said that, the other day I you know, I do tell my kids kind of, I want them to have a bit of a flavour, because I'm like, you know, don't want them kind of always bragging on about what dad does for work and, oh, mum's got a bit of a boring job, because they never hear about it. I want them to be proud that, you know, so you know, they do know bits and bobs. And my daughter has just started to do sociology at school, and ended up getting a bit of a some five points awarded to her because she gave an example of something that I'd done in my career, you know, sort of, you know, I think there was an off-the-cuff comment from another student about the fact that I don't understand these women who have children and then don't want them or don't look after them properly. What's all that about? So my daughter piped up with something that I would have been very proud of to have said myself, and the teacher heard that and dug a little bit more, and gave us some achievement points for that. And I can tell you now, I couldn't have been prouder when she came in and told me about that.
That's fantastic. I asked that question completely wrongly. Because I put the professional bit in. The question I should have asked, to what extent do you share stories of when you were a kid with your
yes, I do. I don't really want to elaborate on that.
No, of course, no. I don't. I didn't mean it to go that way. So one of the ideas that I've kind of got around this area is this. This is quite a big thing, but it's a bit flip. It could come across as a bit flip, but for me, and I banged on about it on another podcast yesterday, I think. The core challenge, that, so I've done my consciousness journey, the stuff that I'm feeding into this conversation, right? I've been doing that for I don't know, 12, 13 years, all outside of the space of adoption, right? And what I've learned in group courses, in consciousness groups and stuff like that, is that nobody thinks that they're good enough. So that was very freeing for me, because I thought it was just, well, first of all, I thought it was just, so I didn't think I was good enough at business, right? And I found out that no other business people think that they're good enough at business, apart from some people hide it. I'm not going to mention any names, but of well-known British entrepreneurs who have fallen from grace. So there's some people, some adults are so scared that they'll put this face onward. I'm specific. I'm saying that this is far more common, I think, in blokes than women. So most people don't think, most entrepreneurs don't think they're good enough in business, and most people. So that's just a business thing. And then what I found, most people don't think they're good enough. Full stop. So they're not good enough at, not good enough mum, not good enough dad, not good enough son, good enough entrepreneur, not good enough daughter, not good, like just not good enough. Everybody thinks that. But the central thing, the central thing that underpins a lot of adoptee thought is that they're not good enough, and we've got a really, really compelling reason to believe that.
Yeah,
because we were. So that, like, sharing that as a human trait, I thought it was an adoptee trait, and then I found out it was a human trait. So if it's a human trait, it's a different thing, because and that thought comes and goes, right? So the central issue for adoptive parents, for me, is to help their kids see that they are more than good enough. You can start with good enough, and then you can up it a bit to perfect, and but like that, we're all perfect. It's not an egoic sort of perfection. It's we're all perfect, but we don't see it because we're lost in the mire of our thinking, kind of stuff. And I'm just wondering, from a mum's perspective, what would you do with that? How would you take that philosophy and share it in a kind of a kid-friendly way?
My goodness. I suppose for me, it's the most important thing that you can do, and again, it sounds glib, doesn't it? But spending time with your kids is just invaluable, isn't it? Kind of, actually watching them, letting them lead rather than you lead, letting them explore, and it being okay, accepting them, for warts and all, to me, is the most valuable thing you can do. So you're not controlling them, you're letting them explore, you're letting them show how things are, and you're spending time with them to enable them to do that. I don't know if that answers what you're asking, Simon.
What do you mean by letting them lead?
Well, kind of rather than dictating your thoughts, your ideas on the world, if they kind of sort of say this sort of thing as, "Oh, I'm stupid, I'm not very good at that." So your automatic reaction, I think, is to kind of go, "Don't be silly, you're not stupid." Da, 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 da. And that would be a kind thing to say, wouldn't it? And that actually you don't think for a minute they're stupid, of course. So you want to correct that, because if you're kind of going, "Goodness, what makes you think that then? Give me some examples on that." Now, they're invariably going to be saying it to you while you're trying to cook the dinner. Someone's trying to phone you. There's a football club that you've got to get one of them to. There's also, the cat's been sick somewhere. They're invariably going to say it all of those times, because that's when it happens. So it would be easy to just shut them down then and kind of go, "No, don't be that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard you say. You're not stupid, you're lovely," or whatever, and then move on to your 900 other tasks. But if you've got the opportunity to kind of just sort of say, "Hang on a minute, why are you saying that? What's the evidence for that? And then give me some examples of that. Give me the evidence." And actually, I like that as kind of a, if I'm feeling in a tip-top mood, then I might be able to pull that one out of my bag and say it, because actually when they start to kind of pull up evidence, then there's little opportunities you to go, "Okay, yeah, you're right, you did forget to do that piece of homework. Yeah, you're right, you did miss you know, missed the deadline for this or whatever, etc. Yeah, you're right, you did have a really massive falling out with your sister last night. Yeah, you're right. Hang on a minute, hang on, I can think of other evidence of where you did that really well. What about this? And just throwing it in, you know, and again, leaving that as a comment for them to sort of comment back at, rather than dictating a view to them. I mean, it sounds lovely in it, you know, and it doesn't always work. But I just think, you know, for personally, for my life, I've had to make conscious decisions to make my life a little bit more simple. And the reason I've done that, and it goes against the grain of who I am as a person, I love being busy. There's nothing I love more than having, you know, a diary full. I absolutely love it. But actually, when it is, then I don't have time for when those kind of little conversations come up, and those conversations can really make a difference. So it does mean that sometimes I have a bit more time knocking around than I would like, and my social diary isn't as busy as I would like, and you know, my work, has to change as well because of it. But to me, that's invaluable, because you know, giving your child the space to kind of explore and to bounce things and to come up with their own answers will then enable them to, I hope, to thrive in the future. And that's what we all hope for, isn't it, for our children?
Yeah. What so you were going for I was going for a blockbuster question, and you were going for a drip feed approach. And we all know that, you know, the value of repetition, you know, like training and all that sort of stuff. So I can see now the you know, how my mission to find the blockbuster, you know, create the big insight, is probably off, and the drip feed is, and the drip feed approach is more conducive to family life. So,
I think, yeah, I mean, I think I have to say, it's so boring, isn't it, sometimes when we sit, you know, if you sit and listen to kind of anybody, you know, talking about health and well-being, I suppose, oh, you know, what is the key, what is going to be the big thing which will just transform my life? Well, actually, getting enough sleep, getting good healthy food, getting lots of, you know, a bit of exercise, getting
water.
Water. Oh my gosh, I mean, those answers have been around for how many years? They haven't changed for years and years and years and years and years, have they? But they're you know, and sometimes I think there things like stability and and listening and time and all of that. Again, it's not rocket science. It's not this brand new thing, but actually that is the thing which makes different. If you're not stressed as a parent, then you make fantastic job at parenting. If you are stressed as a parent, that has an impact on your children. You know, if your relationship with your support network or your partner or your family is tense and difficult, that has an impact upon your children and how you parent them. You know, if you're not eating, sleeping well yourself, if you're not in good health yourself, you're not going to be on your best to be able to look after your kids, are you? So it's the really boring things, but if we get the boring things right, they can then, I think, create that right environment to make kids grow and thrive.
Cool. That feels like a good place to bring it in. Okay, is anything else you want to, closing thoughts?
No, I suppose my key thing is, you know, kind of, you know, talk. It's always good to talk. Don't sit, if you're a doctor, sitting thinking, oh my goodness, this is really difficult, this is really tough. Or if you're kind of, you know, if you're a parent listening and you think that, or, you know, you're telling yourself these negative messages, it's always going to be like this or whatever, reach out and talk. You know, if you can find the right support network, you know, then that can make a massive difference. There's no shame in that. In fact, there's an awful lot of strength in that. you know, I'm always happy to talk and listen to people, and we have our own support networks, etc. at Diagrama, but there's many out there. So look, find it.
So I'll put some links in the show notes, listeners, if you want to check out Kate and what her organisation does. Thank you very much for finding the time, and all the best for a swift recovery from the COVID monster. And we'll see you again very soon. Thanks for listening in, listeners, and I'll be speaking to you very soon. Take care. Bye bye.